Hello lovelies, welcome to part 4. Don't forget to check out the other videos in this series as well so that you have a bit more context. But this is sort of like the opportunity to sum things up and find some sort of conclusion. I honestly wish that I had a clear-cut answer to provide you with. Sadly, like with most things in life, there is no strict good versus evil, right and wrong. That's just sadly not the case because this is such a big issue that involves so many facets of life that it's not really easily a clear-cut thing. And obviously I'm just a random person on the internet that you don't know. I can't tell anyone what to do. I'm only trying to shine a light on a topic that I was personally interested in having a look at because of the products that I use. So as we can see, there are a lot of negative things around palm oil, like especially if you watch part 2 of this video. The problem is that you can't deny the evidence that shows the crop yield is so much higher and the effort it would require to replace what we're currently using in terms of palm oil with another oil. The effort and the energy that that would require and the land use would be so much more, which is why we're in kind of like this sticky wicket of a very, very imperfect situation where there are a lot of issues that still need to be resolved. But of course, there's no point of me highlighting all the bad things that are going on without providing a bit of hope, some things that can be done, some things that we can do to try and make a bit of a difference here as well. So for me personally, I actually went into this with very much preconceived notions about the fact that we should all just obliterate it, forget about it, do not support these countries anymore, do not support any change anymore, just totally boycott palm oil. The problem with boycotts is they are very privileged in terms of like the people that can actually do them. It's the same with fast fashion. We know that fast fashion is bad. I'm someone that likes to buy secondhand clothing or ethically made clothing. I have the ability and the time to do that. That's a separate issue. Other people have covered that far better than me. Now, so I got into this topic out of my own curiosity and I did have my own preconceived notions. Honestly, that was a really, really hard thing to address emotionally, mentally, because like it is with anything that we come across in life, like I went through this when I transitioned to veganism, because it makes you come into question about everything that you know, everything that you thought was right, that you thought was a good thing, and actually it's not. And basically it just makes us feel really uncomfortable to come across things that contradict what we've been consuming, because it's very easy on the internet to go into a filter bubble, which is why again I've always stressed like wait to comment until the end of this series. Read the resources I've linked, and also I have a very holistic approach to the views on these things. Let's just get back into it, let's get back into the evidence, and let's go on to the conclusions that these third parties and experts have recommended. So boycotting doesn't actually do any good in terms of palm oil, which is a hard, very hard pill to swallow. It can for other industries, but sadly not really for this. Unless the oil replacement uses less land, is locally grown, and it creates a smaller carbon footprint, for a majority of products palm oil is still the best option because of all of the reasons listed in number 3 in this series. What we can do for those of us who are privileged enough to have the time to do this is to make sure that we are buying from accredited places. So whether that's RSPO or the Rainforest Alliance in the first instance, that is like the immediate first thing that you can do that will hopefully make a bit more of a difference than just buying whatever. Now, as I showed you before, the RSPO have had many issues in the past, and I'm not saying that the issues aren't still here. We've seen that from the second EIA report when they'd already raised all these issues in the first one. In the second one, we can see that only a few changes were really made in this course of like 5 years. However, I do want to state that it is still better to be buying from a registered company with a traceable supply chain. So there's also the Rainforest Alliance, which is another CSR initiative that you could check to ensure people are registered with too. If you're using products that contain palm oil, check on the company if you're not sure. If they cage you with a response or their website doesn't clearly state that they are RSPO certified or certified with the Rainforest Alliance, then yeah, they're clearly not using a traceable supply chain. They're not being open about it, because this is something that companies should be really proud of, because it means that people feel good about shopping with them, and we know that companies want us to feel good when we're buying something. I mean, like, that's just consumerism. I do just want to say that just because a company is registered with the RSPO, that doesn't mean that they've actually become certified. To become certified, it takes a lot more effort, a lot more time, so make sure that whenever you're like checking something out, that they are in fact certified, because it's really easy for a company to just be registered with them and be like, I promise I'm gonna do this stuff. To become certified, it does require more steps. Sadly, as we've seen, there can be a lot of corruption with that, but it still does require more steps, more accountability, more traceability, and that's what we need more of. And so sadly, when it comes to consumer products, this is often the case where it does come down to the consumers who are going to vote with their dollar. I mean, we're living in a capitalist consumerist society, so it really is the dollar vote that kind of counts for more, which is really sad. Instead of like worth, the goodness that's being put back into the world, it does just come down to how you vote with your dollar. Sorry if you can hear rustling, like Pixie is going wild right now. So we've seen this work in lots of instances, so of course, because this is a beauty channel, I'm going to highlight in the cosmetics industry. Think about it, even over the past 20 odd years, a lot of change has actually happened in a positive way, with companies refusing to test on animals, with new technologies being developed. And that's all down to customer demand and pressure that they've been putting on companies. As soon as like people have gone and exposed the truth, that's where pressure gets put on the companies. And an easy way to still do that is to speak vocally on their social media, because they hate it being pointed out. So they'll try and make changes. They really will. The thing that you can do is you can reach out to companies and get your friends and family to do so as well. Voices will be heard, but of course the most powerful vote in our capitalist society is with our dollar. So basically, do both. Yes, it does require time and effort, but if you were having to live in those conditions, wouldn't you want people to be fighting for you as well? Buy from the brands that you trust, and let the ones you don't trust know what they need to do to change. So here's a website with a long list of brands which are actually doing something about where they source their palm oil from. This one is very English centric. There are other resources actually listed down below. And personally, what I really want to see happen is clear labeling on products. So say for example, we went over in video 1 all of the different names that palm oil can go by. I want this to actually become more obvious, and that palm oil is actually stated on products as well, and if they have certification, that must be on products too. Just so then it's a much easier way for consumers to actually see this stuff. You know, like how milk is highlighted, allergens are like in bold on items. Like, it would just make such a difference. Then they don't have to get out their phones all the time and go like sifting through all of this stuff trying to find out the truth, because the way that to make it easier for people to have the power of choice is to make everything a lot clearer for them. Here is another lot of brands on this wonderful Bunny Army website. These big parent companies are, whoa. So a lot of these are actually owned by parent companies that are actually using sustainable resourcing of palm oil. These companies are problematic enough in themselves, and yes, I'm using that word and it makes me cringe inside that I'm using it. However, we need to also realize the fact that they do have so much money means that they can actually influence change, because they're the ones that are the biggest market share in terms of palm oil. It's around about 7 different companies, but because they're big enough to be able to be like, okay, well, I can only buy from these plantations instead, because they are demanding that transparency, that's a very powerful thing. Now, RSPO needs to step up, like, not just step up, leap up, climb a mountain up. They have a long way to go. The thing is that these companies making sure that they're doing that, it can help to enforce greater change. The more people that we have acting towards a better future, the better things will become. So in the WWF reference report, again down below, they too call for transparency in the sector. Without transparency, you don't know where things are coming from, and there's no guarantees for the workers' safety or the environment's well-being. EIA's latest expose shared its conclusion, which I quote, "The world is in the midst of a climate and natural emergency. It can no longer afford to wait for the RSPO to slowly nudge companies in the right direction, while in the meantime allowing them to continue to do harm to both the environment and people. Unless the RSPO recalibrates to a more proactive rather than and reactive approach to mollify growers, it will become irrelevant. It must strengthen its assurance systems and make the entire process, certification, audits and complaints more robust. At present, there is a wealth of evidence that RSPO members are not adhering to the standards, even if they appear to be doing so on paper. The newly created Assurance Steering Committee is now a permanent fixture within the RSPO, must take up the challenge with renewed vigour and credible action. The RSPO's new watchword must become enforcement. And 100%, we can't deny that that needs to happen. We showed you all of the stuff that's happened in part 2, but it's not just up to the companies because it's also up to the government. Is it Verit or Verite? I don't really know. It's got an accent over the E, so I think it's Verite. So they created some really good recommendations as well. Now, this will go on forever, so I will have it on screen for you. I might also edit out me talking about this too. Their recommendations were things like improving the capacity of the Ministry of Labour to detect labour law violations in the palm sector, such as by providing labour inspectors with financial incentives to carry out inspections in the agricultural sector and remote locations. This will help to ensure people aren't paid off or threatened. Setting standards for the amount of fines corresponding to specific violations in order to combat corruption and favouritism. Increase the amount of fines for labour violations and for failing to submit reports on compliance to the labour inspector to dissuasively. Improving systems to ensure that labour brokers are complying with legal requirements and are not engaging in deceitful or coercive recruitment practices. Number 2 is to take measures to more effectively detect cases of forced labour and labour trafficking, prosecute perpetrators and assist victims by training government officials such as labour inspectors, police, healthcare workers, prosecutors and judges on detecting indicators of forced labour and labour trafficking, establishing a system to report cases of forced labour and labour trafficking to appropriate authorities for prosecutions or of offenders, training police, prosecutors and judges on laws that can be used to convict and sanction exploitative employers and labour brokers complicit in the crime of trafficking in person. Point 3 is implement measures to protect Colombian immigrants, including refugees and asylum seekers. Then their recommendations to palm oil producers and buyers. 1. Design and carry out effective supply chain assessments to identify non-compliances with corporate or multi-stakeholder codes of conduct by strengthening assessment protocols to cover labour and human rights risks identified in the palm sector, identifying all suppliers throughout the supply chain, because sometimes this cannot be completely done. You need to know every single person that is involved throughout their entire supply chain. Extending assessment to supply chain locations where the risk is greatest and focusing on subcontracting arrangements and business relationships that may include third-party labour providers. Design and implement training and capacity building programs in order to enable relevant staff and workers to better understand the risks associated with palm oil production and institutionalize knowledge and expertise within company and across its supply chain. Develop and make available to workers and community members credible grievance mechanisms to provide them with an outlet to lodge complaints and give them recourse for their rights if their rights are violated. It's one thing to make a complaint, but it's a whole other thing to have that complaint resolved. I mean, any Karen can tell you that. And 4, engage in policy advocacy and stakeholder dialogue on a local, national and international level in order to address risks linked to palm oil production. What can we do as individuals? Well, knowledge is power, right? So I'm a big believer in that. That's why I kind of got into this whole thing and have dug up all of the resources I have across these 4 videos. So I will actually also have below in the comments a copy and paste that you can actually email to any companies that you want when inquiring about palm oil sourcing. Like I said before, boycotting is not recommended. However, with all things in life, reduction of highly processed foods is recommended, reduced or eliminated meat intake, again, palm is used for feedstock, for example, and ensuring transparency is where it's at. So we've obviously got watchdogs out there, but we always do need to have continued action and awareness around this stuff. So if there are any new reports, please do let me know, because I'd be so happy if in 5 years time, like, the RSPO has made changes, the fact that governments require any palm oil plantations to be certified, and it would just make me so happy if I know that these videos don't reach many people, but if it at least reaches a few people to have been able to help influence people to like try and make a change, I think that would be really positive. Like I said, I just want to bring this stuff to light. I don't have the power of the EIA. I'm just an individual who has a very small amount of subscribers on this channel, so there's only so much that I can realistically do, but what I can do is raise the awareness. Genuinely a mammoth task that needs to be undertaken. It's going to require people working together and potentially increasing the cost of products too, in order to make sure that people are paid fairly. Now, or not even just paid fairly, paid at all, treated fairly, in livable conditions. Now, I know that this might sound really scary, it does to me as well, especially because I'm a millennial and looking at how much I need to retire is terrifying, but the world's probably going to collapse by then anyway, So again, if you think this is a really big ask, just think to yourselves, would you want to be working in these conditions? Would you feel comfortable sending your family member across a border to then get trafficked and wind up in these situations? It must be so terrifying for these people, which is why it's really important to have a look into it. It's really important to know about it and try and do what we can to make change. Enough voices can make change. We've seen this in the BLM movement. Granted, more change needs to happen on a massive scale. It's sometimes up to individuals to band together and work together on this to make change where corporations don't want to for the good of their profit margins, and then governments don't want to because they don't care or they're actually profiting from the exploitation. I hope that you learned something new from this series, and I'm just really sorry it's not a clear-cut ending. But like I said at the start, it's not always as clear-cut as good versus evil. Not everything is like a Disney movie or a kids movie. Sadly, it would be so good if we could just identify who the villain is, who I clearly would be today from the way that I'm looking. I mean, come on. And also link other resources down below. I'm always here for reading up on more things, finding out more information. This is just the stuff that I could find. The next deep dive I want to go into is still around the beauty industry, but instead around attractiveness bias. This is something that I'm very interested in, and hopefully a lot of people are going to watch it because, again, it takes a lot of time. Be really, really great. 96% of people that watch me are not subscribed. I would really appreciate it if you would just subscribe and also hit that like button as well. I come up with a video every single week. When I can, there are 2 videos a week, so look out on a Thursday and a Sunday. Sunday's guaranteed, Thursday's like a bonus. I hope that you've enjoyed this, and I really hope it hasn't made you too depressed, and I'll see you lovers again very soon. Bye!